With much love and respect, ladies and gentlemen, I present John Robbins.
Thank you for that applause. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making the statement that being here means to you. I know what it means to me. I'm learning what it means to me. To join together with people who share a purpose, who share a dedication, who share a dream, and who share suffering, who share a pain, a wound with our world, with our times. I was born in 1947, and I think that around that time a whole new raft of people were streaming onto the planet. And we were coming in at a time when the collective consciousness was saying, my God, what have we done? This must never happen again. The revelation of what had happened in Germany, the bomb, was telling us that we had to shift or we would die. That we had to shift profoundly and transform ourselves and our culture and the whole lineage of our society. It was telling us that the rational, technological, scientific mind by itself could not teach us how to nurture ourselves in the world. It was telling us that we had lost track of our kinship with life, reverence and respect, empathy and connection. And so I think a whole lot of us, whether we were born then, before, or later, are being told and being taught and being called out by life now to stand for something more universal, a spirit. And asked to live that and live in alignment with that. Now, in my case, I was born into the Baskin Robbins family, as probably many of you know. My dad and my uncle were the founders of that company. And as my father's only son, it was always expected that I would succeed him. And I was groomed for that task from my earliest childhood. But as I matured and my own values began to emerge, it became clear to me that something else was happening. I was being drawn in a different direction. And there were increments and changes. And it was a painful experience because really I was beginning to experience that I had to leave behind everything I'd ever known as security, as reality, the assumptions of that lifestyle, and the wealth of it and the prestige of it and all of that. I remember one day that symbolizes that transformation for me. We had just come up with a new slogan, "We make people happy." And you maybe saw it on billboards or heard it in radio jingles. It was used a lot. And I wasn't happy at all. I was actually very uneasy with it. But not from the point of view that it wasn't an effective advertising slogan. I mean, I suppose it was. But I remember telling my father, we don't make people happy, we sell ice cream. And I said, human happiness is just too important a thing to trivialize like that and consumerize like that. Human happiness is a challenge. It's something we do together and give each other and reach out for together. It's something we share and create together. It's nothing that can be bought or sold. And while he admired my ardency and in spirit, he didn't really understand. And that was just another day, another straw on the camel's back for me. And soon enough I left. And I walked away from the ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in our backyard. And the whole lifestyle, and I told my family I did not want a trust fund and I didn't want any access or reliance on the family fortune. I really wanted to follow my integrity, follow the call of my conscience, and just see what that would do. I had no idea, but being young and reckless and a little flippant, I felt like giving it a shot. I moved to a little island off the coast of another island off the coast of British Columbia, and built a one-room log cabin with my wife. And there we grew all our own vegetables, all our own food actually, and organically, and lived on about $600 a year for about 7 years. I mean, it was a real pendulum swing, I'm sure you can tell. And my father and family, I mean, I can really understand his point, thinking I was crazy. He had worked so hard to attain a success and had done so, and here I was walking away from it. He couldn't understand. I didn't understand him real well either, I must admit. But there I was, trying to weave myself back into the web of life. I was sick, physically. I'd had a form of polio as a child that had left me for a time paralyzed from the waist down. And even after that came, my left leg didn't heal very well. It was 3 inches shorter than the other, and very, very weak. My spine was all twisted, and at the age of 21, the doctors said, that's the way it is, your bones aren't going to grow any further, you're always going to have this affliction, etc. But as I began to live by my own values and bring my life into accord with what I felt was arising in all of us, really, in these times, a physical healing occurred. That to me was just the tip of the iceberg. There was a deeper connection being forged inside our collective psyche that I was tapping into. And during that time, I felt so alienated from life. To me, life had been kind of an air-conditioned nightmare. And now I was tuning in and learning to listen. The silence of nature was teaching me to listen. And living very simply, as Thoreau would put it, we made ourselves rich by making our wants few. And I took inspiration and guidance from the earth and from the wisdom teachings of the earth. And one particular one that meant a lot to me was a chief Seattle. Yes, his name was Seattle in the Northwest, but about 100 years ago he was the chief of a Northwestern Indian tribe, Native American tribe. At the time when his people had to leave their lands and go to a reservation, very sad. I'm sure you know the story, of how the white men moved across the continent and what occurred. Very tragic. And this was a poignant and pathetic time. And he made a speech. And he said something remarkable that always lived in me. And he said, all right, we'll go. I mean, they had tried everything else. They'd fought, they had run away, they had done everything, but they had to, it was die or go to the reservation. So he said, okay, we'll go. But, he said, I ask one thing in return from the great chief in Washington. That's how he put it. Now, what do you think he asked for? What would you have asked for? When I put myself in his shoes, I think maybe I would have asked for additional horses or blankets or food for the journey to the reservation. Or perhaps that the reservation be larger. Or that our ancient burial grounds be respected. Something like that, maybe? No, he asked something very different. He said, what we really want, the one thing we ask, is that the white men treat the animals of this land as his brothers, part of his family. Now, why did he ask that? I think I know. I think there were many reasons. And I think, for one, for Chief Seattle and his people, to some degree, life itself was sacred. The act of breathing was an act of worship and prayer. The sunrises and the sunsets and the stars at night, those were the only sermons they needed. The sound of the wind in the trees, the sound of the birds, those were the hymns. The birds were the choir. And I think for them, to some degree at least, all the other creatures, all the other animals were part of the fellowship, part of the congregation, sharing the breath of life. And therefore, he said, treat them as part of your family. And I think he looked at us, he looked at the white man, and he saw our profound alienation, our separation from life, how disassociated we'd become. He saw the war taking place in our lives, against nature, against the environment, against each other, against his people, against ourselves. Endlessly, repetitively, dangerously, disastrously. And he wanted to heal us. I think he spoke from love, and I think he asked that for us. He saw our wounds, and he saw where we were going. So he wanted to welcome us and invite us back into the web of life. He said, come back into the family of creation. Treat the animals as your family, your brothers and sisters. Be part of life, not so separate, arrogant, and antagonistic. Nature and the planetary life force is not a threat to be surmounted or overcome. It's something that can well up within you and teach you and guide you and give you joy. Treat the animals as part. You know as well as I, we haven't done that much. And one thing that I have discovered in the last 5-10 years that bears directly on this issue is that the way animals are treated today in contemporary animal factories is the most obscene insult to his last request I can imagine. Now, I'm not talking about the fact that the animals are killed. Down through history, there have been people who have said, well, I'm going to be a vegetarian because from an ethical point of view, I don't want to feed off of death. People like Gandhi, Tolstoy, Leonardo da Vinci, people we esteem, admirable people, have taken that position. I think it's a legitimate one from a humanitarian point of view. But I'm talking about something different. I'm not talking about that the animals are killed or even how they're killed. I'm talking about how they live today in the factory farm. Because we all have images in our minds of Lassie and Timmy on the farm, the barnyards and pastures of yesterday. At Baskin Robbins, up until about 73, in every store, behind the counter, there were photographs of the beautiful Guernseys and Holstein cows in Wisconsin pasture land. Beautiful. They brought forth romantic feelings in me. But there's no truth in those images today, or increasingly less truth. More and more the animals are in confinement, indoors, under conditions that violate every one of their needs, every one of their instincts. I mean, it's really gruesome. And you don't have to be a vegetarian, if you see it, to be appalled, to want to draw the line somewhere on behalf of life. And of course, you know, when animals are treated in this fashion, which is so antagonistic to their natures, a lot of drugs have to be used just to keep them alive and fattening up under the stress. And those drugs, residues of those end up on our plates. So it bears directly from even a selfish health point of view upon us. Now I want to give you one example of what I'm talking about, but first I really want to say why I'm going to do that. Very important. Our power as human beings doesn't arise from turning our back, from going psychically numb, from turning the other way. And yet we all want to do that a lot. I mean, how many times when someone presents painful information about the state of the world, or the state of themselves, or the state of us, whether we want to, just turn off to it and block it and say, well, look, I've got enough pain to deal with. I've got enough already. If I can't do something about it, don't tell me about it. Well, I'm going to tell you something you can do, and we are doing already about it. So that's why I present it. And then our power can arise to do what we can in response to the suffering in our world and in each other and in ourselves. Do you know what happens to the little male calves born in dairy operations? Ever think of it? Because the females are on their way to being made into four-legged milk pups. But clearly, males are useless for that effort, so then what happens to them? Well, they're made into veal. That's what veal is. but by a unique process that is symbolic and representative of the whole factory farm situation. Now here's how it goes. The little males are taken away from their mothers at birth, just taken right away. Their umbilical cords are still attached. These are infants, newborns, babies. And they're sold at an auction, and they're put into a shipping crate. And there they remain for 4 months until they're slaughtered. Now this crate is so tight, so confining, that they have less space than you would have in the trunk of a subcompact car. They're chained so tightly at the neck that they can't turn their head even to lick themselves, which is a basic primal instinct of a cat. They can't take a single step forward, backward, or sideways. They're so tightly bound that they can't even lay down in their normal fetal position to sleep. They have to kind of sit on their legs. Now, why would anyone restrict the movement of a creature so totally? Why would it be so severe? Well, because it's profitable. If you can keep an animal, a baby calf, from ever taking a single step, a frolicking, playful young creature, from ever moving at all in its 4-month life, its muscle tissue will never develop. It will remain flaccid and pasty. This is what we pay extra for and call tender veal. Furthermore, the animals are fed a diet deliberately deficient in iron, rendering them systematically anemic and calling for a great deal of antibiotics to be mixed into every dose of feed, merely to keep them alive. Why? Because if the animals are anemic, their flesh doesn't become reddish, it remains whitish or pinkish, lighter colored. And that is what we look for today in veal, or most consumers do. And we've been taught and trained to think that lighter meats are healthier. Do you see? It's actually the flesh of a tortured baby animal. Now what's done to veal calves today, and the pain of that, is par for the course in contemporary livestock breeding. And when I saw that and learned this and visited these places, I had nightmares. I was visiting animal Auschwitz, where hundreds of thousands of creatures are kept under the most appalling conditions. And I thought, this is intolerable. I can't bear this. I've got to do something. But the excuse for it, one of the excuses, at least in the public mind, in most of our minds, is, well, we need to eat this stuff. Got to get enough protein, got to get our calcium, etc. And I began to investigate, was that really true? And if so, were there other sources? And what was the whole story? What was the real truth? And I found out something remarkable. I got to tell you that in my days at Baskin Robbins, I had a lot of dealings with the Dairy Council. And I knew that they were the largest supplier of nutritional education materials to the school systems of the United States. But I had never really questioned those materials. You know, did you ever see the charts, the basic 4 food groups? Well, there used to be 7. Before that, there were 12. But they got whittled down in Washington by the activities of the fat lobby, by the lobbying efforts funded by the companies who profit from our high-fat diet. And so I began to look at some of those materials. I'll give you an example, some of the things that they provide to the schools. I'm thinking right now of 2 of them. The Dairy Council provides free of charge, handsome booklets, expensively produced, very impressive, called A Boy and His Physique, and A Girl and Her Figure, given to high schools across the country. Now, kids are ingenuous, kids are believable, kids are naive, kids are trusting, God forbid, trusting. And here's what they're told in these books. Targeted at kids who are concerned about their health or their appearance or their weight. Most kids are, one way or the other. Under the lower calorie section, we find remarkable entries, including butter at every meal, a glass of whole milk at every meal, low-fat or non-fat milk is not even mentioned, chocolate pudding, ice cream, and my favorite, in the lower calorie section of booklets given to the kids across the country by the Dairy Council in schools. Cream cheese balls softened with cream and rolled in peanuts. That's 82% of the calories in that concoction are fat, most of them highly saturated. This is going to help kids lose weight? Well, what it really is industrial propaganda. It's a commercial. It's advertising. It's designed to hook us into a lifelong pattern of dairy fat consumption. The National Livestock and Meat Board and the Beef Council do the same thing in their advertising to the public, but perhaps even more insidiously in the things they supply to the schools. And we've all grown up on that, and it's very, very difficult to question it because it's like the foundations of our understanding. So I began to research, and I read thousands of medical journals. And when I wrote Diet for New America, I spent a couple of extra years working to document everything I said from the most credible, established conservative journals. I'm talking about Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine, the British Medical Journal, the Journal of the American Medical Association, etc. And I found out something remarkable. We've always known we should eat a balanced diet, but we're finding out what a balanced diet is. And it's not what we thought. We're finding out that most of the diseases of our time are actually caused by an excess of the very things we thought we needed so much of, including animal protein, animal products. And it's true. Your odds as a male in this society, eating the standard American meat-oriented diet, of dying of a disease caused by your arteries clogging up and hardening on you, are worse than 50%. You'd have a better risk living a coin. Us men. But if, statistically, we shift to a vegetarian diet, say a pure vegetarian diet, those odds go from worse than 50% down to around 5% or less. That's a tremendous improvement. Women, it's a very similar pattern. Similarly with cancers, including cancers of the breast, colon, prostate, others. Similarly with osteoporosis, diabetes, virtually all the plague strokes of our time. You know, if you were to die of a heart attack, and it's the most common cause of death in the country today, you might have an autopsy performed. It's a fairly common procedure. It used to be more common, but it's still done many, many times. What would happen is your body would be laid out on the autopsy table, and they would cut open your chest and dig around in there and find the coronary artery, the artery feeding the heart, that had gotten plugged up, depriving the heart of its flow of oxygen and blood, killing it, killing you. And they'd find that artery and they'd ream it out. They'd literally pull out a thick sausage-shaped piece of fatty, waxy material that killed you. And they send it very carefully down to the pathology lab. And the next day the results come back and they always say the same thing. This has been done approximately 3 million times in medical research in the world. The results always say the same thing. They say, in effect, saturated fat and cholesterol. Now, never once have they come back and said broccoli and tofu. Now, where does the saturated fat and cholesterol come from? 75% of the saturated fat in the American diet comes from animal fats, most of that beef and dairy fats, also pork fat. The other percentage, by the way, comes from tropical oils, such as palm kernel, coconut, and chocolate, but the vast majority from animal fat. All the cholesterol, 100%, comes from animal products. There is none in any vegetable food. Grain, vegetable, fruit, seed, nut, anything like that. As I saw that the products of the factory farms were not only resulting from enormous cruelty, but were killing us, I began to think, whoa, we're seeing something here. But I still felt afraid of speaking out about it, or not so sure, because, you know, I have this kind of feeling that if you want to eat a steak, give yourself a heart attack, you have a right to do that. You have a right to self-destruct in any way you want. People have a right to go to hell any way they choose. And the fact that it was causing this hideous suffering, unnecessary to animals, really bugged me. But I didn't feel very confident I could sway people into empathy for other creatures. The callousness on the human heart seemed to have grown to such an extent that I didn't know whether it could be released. But then I began to learn a whole other side to this, which is the consequences to our environment of today's systems of meat production. And they are profound. We've been hearing a lot about the hothouse effect. I want to call it the hothouse, not the greenhouse, because it's not going to make a greener world. It's going to make a hotter world. And the increase in droughts we may expect, and the increase in pressure in differentials in the upper atmosphere, which create wind machines, and more tornadoes and hurricanes, and just general havoc to the climate, and destabilizing to our atmosphere. And Stephen was talking about some of the possibilities and how we're working to slow it down and so forth. But I want to tell you about what our diet is doing to that. See, there's four main gases contributing to global warming. Carbon dioxide, methane, the CFCs, the chlorofluorocarbons, and the nitrous oxides. All of those are produced by the way we are producing meats today, in unbelievable quantities. Let's go over them. Very simply, carbon dioxide. Nature's storage banks of carbon are trees and fossil fuels, and when you burn them, that carbon is released, where it goes up into the sky and collects, trapping the heat, etc. Fossil fuels. Do you know that it takes approximately 40 times more fossil fuels today to be burned to produce a pound of protein from meat than it does to produce a pound of protein from a vegetable or grain source? 40 times more. That means that if we as a culture just speculate, dream for a moment, just imagine we're to move vegetarian, we would actually save about 90 to 95% of the fossil fuels we currently burn to produce our diet. That's a tremendous amount. The numbers vary according to the different projections and scenarios and models you look at, but all of them show a staggering benefit. Why are we burning our trees? Oftentimes, remarkably often, to create land to graze cattle or to grow cattle feed. This is true in the continental United States as it is in the tropical rainforests. The Rainforest Action Network, a group of people who are not vegetarians originally, just wanting to save the rainforests. But they went to work to find out whose hand is really on the machete, on the chainsaw, destroying these priceless, irreplaceable jewels of nature. And they ended up boycotting Burger King because they found out that in every fast food quarter pounder, there's 55 square feet of tropical rainforest. And they found that with that destruction, indigenous people, native cultures were being destroyed, species were being exterminated, our climate was being destabilized and deprived of its sources of oxygen at an alarming rate. A football field a second. 24 hours a day, 365 days of rainforest is being destroyed. Much of that, not all, but much, for cattle grazing. Do you know that for every American who shifts from a standard American meat-centered diet to a purely vegetarian diet, an acre of trees is spared per year? We talk about choices for a healthy environment. Do you know what it's like to plant an acre of trees? Do you know what it's like to save an acre of trees per year? What that feels like? What it does for your self-esteem and self-respect and feeling of connection to the healing forces of the planet and the life force of the planet that's calling out, that's crying, that we all hear its weeping and its sadness and its call? To be in league with that, to be in alliance with the Spirit, it's pretty strong. The other greenhouse gases, methane. The main sources of methane today come from cattle feedlots and from termites and from some rice paddies. Why? They're produced by anaerobic bacteria, which, as Steve mentioned, are in the guts of termites and cattle. They digest the cellulose. It comes out of both ends of the cattle at an incredible rate. It's called eructation, politely. But the methane photographs show the feedlots in dark red. And when you clear a forest to graze cattle, that's termite heaven. More methane. The chlorofluorocarbons, the CFCs, which are also the chemicals that are destroying the ozone layer, evidently. Do you know, we use them primarily today in refrigeration and air conditioning and freezing. Open your average freezer. Just what do you see? A lot of meat, mainly meat. Cornell scientists have estimated if we were to become a vegetarian country, how much chlorofluorocarbons would be saved, and it's staggering. Nitrous oxides come from a number of industrial sources. One of the main ones is the breakdown of nitrogenous synthetic fertilizers. The main use of synthetic nitrogen today is not on golf courses or lawns, although a lot is used there, but on the vast square miles growing cattle feed. See, it takes about, the numbers vary, but roughly 16 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of feedlot beef. It's very wasteful from a feed conversion ratio. Most of the food, of the calories, go not into meat, but into hair and hooves and body heat and manure and the little movement the animals are allowed. It's wasted. Which is why Francis Moore Lepay pointed out some years ago that if the United States reduced its consumption of meat by 10%, that would free up enough grain to feed 60 million people for a year. And she pointed out that 60 million people are the number who starve to death or die of starvation-caused disease on this planet every year. The number of people in this room, in this tent, if we shifted from a standard American diet to a vegetarian diet for a week, we would save enough grain by doing that to feed 40,000 children for 3 days. 40,000 children die of starvation on this earth every day. It's very wasteful. It's very stupid. We kill livestock in order to protect, we kill wild animals in order to protect our livestock, which we then kill in order to eat, which kills us. And then we kill more animals to experiment on to find out how to fix that. And meanwhile, we're killing each other and ourselves in 1,000 other ways. And what's the root motivation of all of this? Why are we so crazy? What's going on? Can we heal it? Well, I really listened to Chief Seattle, who said, what we do to the world, we do to ourselves, who welcomed us back into the web of life, into our own hearts and souls, and companionship with each other. There isn't an ecological problem today that wouldn't be immediately and powerfully and substantially benefited by a shift towards a more vegetarian lifestyle. Let's talk about water for a moment, water use. How much water do you think it takes, according to the USDA, to produce a pound of meat? 2,500 gallons. 2,500 gallons. That's a lot of water. That's 10 tons of water. That's as much water as an average family of 4 uses for all of its household purposes, including the washing machine and the lawns, in a month. 1 pound of meat. Wheat, in contrast, takes only 1% as much water. Now, let's say you're a conscientious citizen of planet Earth today. I suspect just about everyone in this room is. And you want to save water. You know about the droughts. You know about the draining and the depletion of our water storage, water supply. So you want to save water, and you install a low-flow shower head in your shower. Maybe it's not as much fun to shower, but you do it. You maybe turn off the water while you're showering, while you're lathering or shampooing. If you're a man, you perhaps turn off the tap, except while you're rinsing your blade, while you're shaving. You learn perhaps to run your dishwasher or your washing machine, if you have them, only when they're full. You perhaps, if you have a garden, you use soakers instead of sprayers because it's more efficient. You flush less often. You do all these things. You're careful with your water. Let's say you're really conscientious, and let's say you're a family of 4 that uses the average 2,500 gallons of water a month. How much water do you think you can save in a month as a family of 4? Maybe a third of the average total? Can you reduce it by a third? I think you can if you work at it. That'll save about 800 and maybe 850 gallons of water in a month. Let's be real generous. 1,000 gallons of water a month for the whole family. Do you realize by not eating 1 quarter pounder, you save almost that much? As a family of 4 can save in a month by doing all of that. More than half the water consumed for all purposes in the United States is used to produce meat. It's true about every single environmental issue, and I could go into them all. Oh, I didn't mention one other thing, too, that has meant a lot to me, and that is, I've often felt in my life that I have to make moral compromises. Choose between the lesser of 2 evils. Give up something in order to have something. Handle the paradoxes and the ambiguities by being mature. And give up something of my innocence and delight and joy in the process. But what I have learned and seen is that the very choices that are best for me selfishly, biologically, that give me the most health, the most energy, the most vitality, relative immunity from disease, are the same choices that are kindest to other creatures and best for the ecosystems. The alignment of that calls me out to be here with you today. The dots connect. It's not a question of self-sacrifice, of taking some ascetic measure for the good of all and biting the bullet, stiff upper lip, and hurting more. It's about responding to the pain that's already there with intelligence and wisdom and sanity and ethics, and seeing how those are all drawing us in the same direction. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a vegetarian to be concerned about your health, to want your life to be a statement of compassion, to want your influence on the world to be a positive one and beneficial. But today, you have to know what's really going on. You have to know the real consequences of your choices so that you can make truly life-affirming ones. And that's why I wrote Diet for a New America, and that's why I'm here with you, is to share what I have learned about these processes. And also to share with you both the joy in seeing the alignment, how it fits together, and the pain in realizing what is asked and what it tells us about the way we have been living. Things we've taken for granted. Things we thought were good for us. I mean, when I used to talk to my mother about these things, she felt I was as if I was saying, emotionally, that she had fed me wrong all those years. That she'd been wrong. She once said to me, "You will not cook tofu in my kitchen." She did. She really did. I guess we all have to draw the line somewhere. And when I would talk to my dad about this, Mr. Ice Cream, and this is the guy that built the ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool. He, I think I was talking Greek or something. It went right by. But I have to tell you, my uncle, Bert Baskin, my dad's partner, died of a heart attack about 20 years ago. And many of my father's peers are having heart attacks, coming down with cancers, having strokes, some of which the strokes leave them like vegetables, unable to remember their loved ones. It's tragic. And my father knows, statistically, he is a candidate to go the same route. So he's concerned. When the book was published, Diet for New America, I sent him a copy. not knowing if he would read it, honestly, but, you know, you do these types of things. I think it sat on their coffee table, actually. But it's a funny story. Baskin Robbins has a clipping service. And any time the words Baskin Robbins are mentioned in any article, in any journal or newspaper or magazine or book that's published in the world, they get a copy. Now, what this meant was that any review of my book or article about a speech I gave or about the activities of EarthSave, because it's the human interest level and the reporters love it, it mentioned Baskin Robbins, they got it. I didn't receive most of the reviews of my book, except they did. Now, what is Baskin Robbins going to do? It's an embarrassment. I mean, this is the maverick. I mean, what? So they give them to my dad, right? They send them all to him. All of them. All of them. All of them. All of them. Now, my poor father, he decides he'll save them for me someday. So he's saving them. But he looks at a couple of them, and he starts reading more of them, and they happen to be very, very, very positive, including ones from medical journals and very credible places, and he's scratching his head. Because this is the son that didn't have it, that said no, basically, to him. And not many people to have in his life. So he gave the book, evidently, to his cardiologist, who is one of the best, or perhaps more, I should say, one of the highest priced heart specialists in the country. And said, will you look at this and tell me if there's anything in it? But what happened was that he got a call, I think, later, and the gentleman said to him, I'd like you to come in the office and talk with me. And my father got a little, I think, concerned. Come to the office. I mean, can't we do it on the phone? I mean, is there something wrong? Did the test show something? Is the book crazy? I think the guy knew what was involved, and he said to him, your son's book, actually, is superb, and you'd be well advised to follow its advice. So I really feel for my poor dad. I mean, but he did. And he lost weight. And the blood pressure medication that they had said you'll have to take for the rest of your life, he didn't need anymore or as much of. His blood sugar levels stabilized, and his diabetes got better. Lots of things. Energy picked up. He had more energy than he had in years. Fabulous results. And he started to think, my God. Now, when I asked him, did he think there was any relationship at all between my uncle's heart attack and the amount of ice cream that he used to eat, my dad said, oh no, Bert's ticker just got tired and stopped working. And I didn't argue, and nor will I, because for my dad, who's sold more ice cream than any company in the history of the world and so forth, to consider that product might have been harming people, I wouldn't ask him to consider that. It's just too much for his level of denial and resistance and what he can handle. But he has been able to see a lot. And all of us work our way through our conditioning, through our denial, through our psychic numbness, coming into life the way we do, the winding path, the wayward way we reach for the stars and the light and for wholeness and health and for each other. I love that he's made the changes he's had. I feel honored and privileged to have been a part of them. That he could listen to me a little bit. And I want to tell you another story that's meant a lot to me personally too. When I was researching the book, I visited the factory farms and the slaughterhouses, and I saw such terrible things. One of them was I'm thinking of now, was a pig factory, a hog hell. And the hogs were stacked in stainless steel tiers where their excrement dropped continuously on the ones below. They couldn't move around. These are powerful animals. And they're just penned in, and it's a terrible thing. But there I was. I need to find out these things, so I'm there. And I'm interviewing the guy that runs it, the owner. And it's pretty hard. It stinks, and it's noisy, and it's disgusting. And I'm there playing the game. And I don't betray any of my own feelings. It's poker face time. I don't want to polarize. I don't want to argue. I just want to get information. And I'm asking about what drugs he uses for swine fever and what he does for porcine stress syndrome and et cetera, et cetera. Playing the game. And I'm there for about an hour, and he's getting sick of me, and he's about to throw me out. And his wife comes in from the house and invites me for dinner. And he immediately says, because he was really, he'd had enough of me. He's this big, burly guy, and she's about 4'11". And he said, the wife wants you to stay for dinner. I said, I'd be delighted. Thank you. How nice of you. So there I was. And I didn't argue about anything. I didn't reveal any of my own inner thoughts or feelings. It just felt appropriate not to. I didn't want to argue with these people. And I didn't eat what they served me. But I didn't want to create a ruckus, so I just said, my doctor has told me to cut down on my cholesterol. Can't, sorry. Which went, he was drinking at dinner, and after dinner, he was getting a little soused. And he's all of a sudden, it seemingly out of nowhere, he pounded his hand on the table and said, sometimes I think you animal rights people should just drop dead. And I just went, whoa. And I looked where the door was and where he was and where the tables were, and he was drunk and he was big, and I just was a little concerned. And his wife immediately got up and started doing the dishes. And I said, oh, why? Tell me about that. Did they cause you trouble? Because I hadn't said anything about myself. And he said, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And he went on to talk about his reality, how hard it was to keep up with the other bigger operations if he didn't do that stuff, the ugly things that they do to the animals and the uses of the drugs. And it's true. He's caught in an economic vice. He doesn't, from his point of view, he has no choice. He doesn't want to be cruel. In fact, at one point, suddenly he said, you're right. And I hadn't said a word. He said, you're right. He said, no animal should be treated like that, especially hogs. He said, why, they're sensitive, intelligent animals. They're even friendly if you treat them well. He said, why, when I was a kid, I had a pet pig, and I loved him. And he went on to tell me this story. He grew up as the only son of a farmer, and he had a bunch of dogs, and he had one pig that he loved more than any of the dogs. And when he'd go swimming in the lake, the dogs would swim after him and kind of climb on him or something. And it was really a drag for him, but the pig would jump in, swim faster than dogs, and keep them off like a bodyguard. And he would sleep with this pig every night in the barn. And he didn't have any brothers, it was his best friend. He loved it. They'd play. Pigs are very smart. And then one day, I don't know how old he was, 11, 12, his dad said to him, you're going to have to butcher that animal. And he told me he threw a temper tantrum, he screamed, he wanted to run away. And his father said, you got a choice. You either kill that animal or you're no longer my son. So he killed the animal. And I think it was so traumatic for him. He just repressed everything to do with the feelings involved and ended up, do you see, in his later life, running a hog nightmare. Do you see how running away from those feelings, I guess. There he was. But this night, when I was having this dinner with this family, those feelings somehow came to the surface. And he was telling me about it, and he cried. He cried hard, actually, and I would have never expected this kind of guy to do that. Well, I didn't know how he was ever going to assimilate these feelings into his life. Or if he could. And what pain this would cause him. And I just was as attentive and as there with him emotionally and so forth as I could as a human being. And one jokingly said at one point, well, I don't know what you're going to do. Maybe you'll grow broccoli or something. Yeah. Well, anyway, when the book came out, I sent him a copy. And I said, you're famous. Read page 42 or whatever the number was. And I tell a little bit about our evening together. Of course, I changed the name out of respect for him. But anyway, I got a letter back about 5 months later, that I want to share with you because it's really remarkable. He wrote that when the book came, he immediately got a migraine headache. which he informed me didn't go away when he threw the book against the wall, nor when he threw it in the wastebasket, nor when he threw it in the toilet. Then he writes, the wife, whom you will remember, dried it out and suggested I read it, thinking there might be some correlation or association between my migraine, which did come the minute I spotted your book. I avoided it for weeks, he said. But the migraine didn't go away. And there's this list of painkillers he writes me that he took. Remarkable thing, none of which worked. Poor man. And then he finally read it, and he said, I read the whole thing, and it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life, which I believe. He said, you write so beautifully. I couldn't stop. And then he said, this morning, my migraine went away when I finished your book and decided to sell my herd. I love him. He's good. Oh, and then he wrote in the letter, I'm sure he forgot that about our conversation about the broccoli, but he writes, he says, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll grow broccoli or something. So there he is, doing that. And each of us has our own lifestyle. You know, we have our own biochemical individuality, our own tastes, our own habits, our own needs for convenience. We live in a meat-eating culture. So we have choices to make. We have healing choices to make. Choices that can heal us, heal our self-respect, heal our bodies. As we cease or diminish the amount of animal fat we're running through our bloodstream, we feel better almost immediately. We feel lighter. We feel more creative. We feel happier. We feel more connected. Our life insurance companies and doctors will be pleased. The animals, though they haven't a voice to tell us, will be profoundly pleased. The rivers, the lakes, the forests, the oxygen will be pleased. Our children, our grandchildren, all those yet to be born, perhaps are those most pleased. As things are going, unless we change, there is some doubt whether our children will have a world in which to love each other, in which to grow and flower and flourish and live. There is some doubt whether they will ever be able to take a breath of fresh air. What is the price you would pay for a breath of fresh air if it wasn't available? And the price of giving up habits, of breaking the inertia, the momentum of the meat-eating style, I think it's small compared to the rewards and joy of entering into the living spirit flow that I see evolving today, that I see welling up in 1,000 different ways, in 1,000 different places. I sense a collective wisdom arising and calling to us and speaking to each of us in unique ways, and using so many of us as its voices and hands and arms and instruments and vehicles, seeding the planet with love, with true connection. And learning to listen for that wisdom as it arises. I have found no greater strength than bonding at the heart with people of kindred purpose, which is why I'm so pleased with this meeting today, and this week, and other ones like it, and all the other things that people like ourselves do once we've made that commitment and turned our lives over. We've basically said, here I am, this is my life, use me. We put it out. We put it to the universe. Whoever is listening, dear universe, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. And our world itself now is drawing that out of us, drawing our spirits forth, the very urgent realities of our time, which we all face together and cannot face alone, are bringing out about this bonding. I know that for many people, the changes that are called for can sometimes feel overwhelming. And we can say, well, what can one person do? It's too far gone. We don't have any margin of error left. We've reached the point of no return. The ozone layer's too thinned out, or it's going to be soon enough. The chemicals are already there. The global warming is it's just too hard. I mean, everybody's got to believe in something. I'll believe I'll have another beer and space out. But the thing is, when we realize that, well, Norman Cousins put it, I think, most beautifully. He said, nothing is more powerful than an individual acting out of his or her own conscience, thus helping to bring the collective conscience to life. We all are part of the collective common heart. And what we do sends waves through it all. This is the truth. You may say, well, I can't go up and speak to people, or, as Steve said, negotiate with China or whatever. True. But it isn't what you say that matters. It's how you live. It is the integrity of your own being. It is the alignment of your own spirit. And when we are in accord with that strength, something radiates, emanates from us continuously, awake or asleep, with people or not, doing something of apparently public significance or not. Our example is our teaching. Our life becomes our message. And it speaks in the common language of the Spirit. It speaks to all creatures. It speaks to all beings, regardless of their political stance, social position, degree of association to what we are thinking. And that is what I feel is being strengthened in this gathering and in all of our lives today. Thank you.